your guide to the truth. thenewamericanmedia.com.
All right, everybody, this is Brian Engelman. It is Friday, the 7th of October, and you're not hearing our normal intro music because, hey, if you didn't notice lately, it's been in the news. We've ceded control of the internet, and this is just a weird glitch that came up this episode that wasn't there last time. Is it a coincidence? Are they related? Who the hell knows? But I felt I should at least mention that. Welcome. Thank you for joining our Agree to Disagree show here on thenewamericanmedia.com. I want you to check out all of the different places that we're at real quick. TheNewAmericanMedia.com is the homepage. That's where you can find our Facebook feed. That's where you can find our Twitter feed at American_media_. You need to subscribe to YouTube.com/TheNewAmericanMedia. And you also got to find us on Instagram. Just search The New American Media. So without further delay, since I won't bore anybody with all of the logistical shenanigans and mumbo-jumbo that we've had to troubleshoot and get through, but suffice it to say we should probably just cut to the meat of the program instead of long, drawn-out introductions and talking about other things that are going on in the news. We are here with two Oath Keepers. We're here with Stewart Rhodes. You may remember him because he's been a guest on our program before, or you might remember him from, I don't know, anything related to Oath Keepers. And you might remember Greg McWhirter, who's also a member of Oath Keepers, and who has also been on our show before. So, gentlemen, thank you very much for joining us. I'm going to try to keep us from talking over each other, so I'll first direct my question over to Greg. Greg, just a brief overview of who you are, where you're coming from, your affiliation with Oath Keepers, why you think it's important, and then we'll bounce over to Stewart.
Thanks, Brian. I appreciate it. I was a deputy sheriff in Indianapolis for about 11 years. Things have gotten pretty rough in Indianapolis with crime, with the resurgence of heroin, with the uptick in property crime, theft, robbery, and so I had the opportunity to get out of there and take a new job in here in western Montana. I've been a member of Oath Keepers since 2012. I've done some substantial amount of training in law enforcement. I was an Indiana Law Enforcement Academy certified instructor. I did 3 years on the sheriff's tactical team, and during that I served as the training officer that maintained training records and maintain a status and quality of training that's acceptable through NDAA and other tactical associations.
Excellent.
I really believe in Oath Keepers and what Oath Keepers really brings to the table in reminding law enforcement officers how important that their oath is, and that their oath is to the Constitution and to uphold it and to preserve it, because that is what protects our God-given rights, our natural-born rights, however you would like to put it. So reminding law enforcement officers of that is their fundamental charge is to protect that document and uphold that document. I can't see anything wrong with the organization that wants to remind my fellow law enforcement officers to respect that.
Yeah, that is a good point. It's been a while since we've talked, and the world is a different place. America is certainly a different place. I mean, we've seen damn near race riots pop up in Ferguson. We've seen it in Baltimore. We've seen it in Charlotte. A lot of racial hate-filled propaganda, encouragement from highly funded people to stir the pot, to toss a smoke bomb down the hallway and watch what happens when everyone runs out coughing at once into the hallway, clawing for air. It kind of just seems like a sick joke that's been happening, and with your experience with law enforcement, I'm really interested to kind of get your take on things. that have gone on since the last time you've been on the program. But first, I want to get over to Mr. Stewart Rhodes. Stewart, probably same question to you. We have a hurricane in the news right now going through Florida, Georgia, causing a whole bunch of damage and destruction. And you founded Oath Keepers based on a hurricane event that was during Katrina. So if you could maybe reintroduce yourself and explain how you got Oath Keepers started, I'd appreciate it.
No sweat. Well, actually, primary reason I started Oath Keepers is because of what I saw when I was a student at Yale Law School, and I wrote my major thesis on enemy combatant status. In particular, it was the detention of Jose Padilla, a U.S. citizen, for 3 years in a military brig in South Carolina with no grand jury indictment, no jury trial, no due process whatsoever. And then also American citizen named Yasser Hamdi, who had traveled to Afghanistan, was captured by the Northern Alliance and turned over to U.S. forces, but he's an American citizen. If you want to accuse him of being a traitor, great. Try him for treason in a jury, before a jury of his peers. So it was the abandonment of the entire Bill of Rights during the Bush administration that was my prime wake-up call and motivator for starting Oath Keepers. And I was, I used to work for Congressman Ron Paul before I went to law school. I was on his D.C. staff, and I was part of the 2008 campaign in Nevada. And when I realized that when Ron Paul did not get the nomination and John McCain got it, I knew we were in deep doo-doo. And back then, I didn't know who was going to be the Democratic side. Didn't matter. So whether it was going to be Barack Obama or Hillary Clinton, I knew we were in trouble. So that's why I started Oath Keepers. What Oath Keepers really is a continuation of the Ron Paul Revolution. That entire, one of the advantages and one of the reasons why Ron Paul ran was to teach the American people about the Constitution, about natural rights, about economics, just about sanity, about liberty. And, and was very successful among young people. I think a lot of people be pessimistic and think that all the young people are idiots. Well, my experience in Southern Nevada was all the old people with walkers and oxygen tanks who were complete Kool-Aid drinking statists and basically fascist during the Bush administration, who hated all these young Ron Paulers. And here we are coming in with new blood, and they rejected them. So it was a two-sided coin. On the one side, it was like a good thing to see that, hey, you can still reach these kids even though they've been in government indoctrination centers, public schools. They're still not brainwashed. They can still see for themselves, and they still have the internet. And so there's hope out there. But on the flip side, I realized the political situation is FUBAR. The two major parties are dominated by big government psychopaths, frankly. And so, I thought, okay, we're not going to be able to secure the White House, and obviously Congress is also dominated by freaks. Look at the bipartisan support for the Patriot Act, the bipartisan support for the NDAA. It's pretty obvious. So I thought to myself, what can I do to try to throw a monkey wrench and carry this on and do some, try to buy us more time. And I thought, I'm going to focus on the warrior class. I'm going to focus on the guys with the guns and the guys with the training and the one be given the orders to put us, in concentration camps or violate our rights, and also the people that might be able to, stand up and put a stop to it. And so that's why I focus on current serving military, ex-military, current serving cops, ex-police officers, and EMTs, firefighters, search and rescue. These are all the American warrior class, and then gun owners too. Those of us who were raised to be independent and take care of ourselves and our families, and have the cojones to step up and defend ourselves and have the awareness that's how the world works. That's who I want to reach. It's all it really is the Ron Paul revolution of teaching about liberty, but focused on the warrior class so that we can do our best to buy more time for the American people to wake up and then fix this problem from the bottom up. So that's our focus. That's why I started Oath Keepers. But Katrina is a useful wake-up call, because there you saw, current serving cops, National Guardsmen, you had police officers nationalized from all over the country going to Louisiana and obeying blatantly unconstitutional orders to go house to house and disarm people who are just trying to protect themselves and their property. So it's a good wake-up call, because you get some folks who say, well, how dare you even question whether our military will follow the Constitution. Of course they will, and you're insulting them. Or how dare you even suggest that a cop's going to do the wrong thing? Well, they did in Katrina. They obeyed unconstitutional orders. But, you know, I realize, though, of course, the reason why most of them did so is because they're just plain ignorant. They don't know the Constitution. They weren't taught the Constitution in high school. And in the military, you're taught the laws of war, but they don't give a class on the Bill of Rights. So we have to make sure that we give the troops and the cops the education they should have gotten in civics and make sure they know where the lines are.
Well, thank you, Stewart. Yeah, definitely. I know that there's a lot of areas. I know that we met a few Oath Keepers out when we went to cover the Bundy Ranch situation. We know that Oath Keepers have been around at some of these areas of civil unrest that have been popping off all too common, all too often in America in the past year and a half, 2 years or so. And there's a lot of ways and reasons why. A reminder, a friendly, gentle reminder to all the people who we're entrusting so much to and demanding so much from, that they be reminded that in a worst-case scenario, they got to watch out for peer pressure. They got to watch out for what's happened to different countries in the past. If you're told to do something and it's intimidating enough, sometimes you do something you wish you wouldn't have. And sometimes all it takes for evil to succeed in this world is for the good men to stand by and do nothing. So it's a very important lesson that I think the people in our country with the most opportunity to prevent and protect and defend the people of this country, I think it's just a wonderful message to send regardless of anything else. I think that message is something that the world needs to hear. Americans definitely need to hear. And Greg, I wanted to ask you, I alluded to it during the intro, but I wanted to kind of hear from you with your law enforcement background, how you feel things have changed regarding the roles and expectations and respect being shown toward the law enforcement officer in 2016.
Wow, that's a big question. We have seen a drastic change of the attitude towards law enforcement, and let me clarify. There is a distinct difference between advocating any corruption and police accountability and what we're seeing. And what we're seeing is hate being spread and proliferated throughout our inner cities towards law enforcement. And it's, to an extent, it's always been there. I grew up a inner city kid in Indianapolis. I went to IPS. I went to School 105. I went to John Marshall for middle school. I went to Tech High School. I've been there in the inner city where it's rough. That's where I grew up. I know firsthand. I've seen it. I've seen what's going on in the inner city that leaves people broken and hopeless and hurt. I've been there, but what I'm seeing today is unprecedented, where we're having cops ambushed in Dallas, where we're having cops, Dallas is a particular situation where we have these officers who are doing exactly what they're supposed to be doing. There's a protest. They are standing on the sidelines. They're not interrupting people's protests. They're doing exactly what our cops are supposed to do. And they're gunned down. This is the kind of thing that's being spread. And with my conversations with other law enforcement officers and my own feelings, I think it's being taken advantage of to consolidate power and to consolidate authority. And when systems are decentralized, like law enforcement is, when you look at it from the top down in the country, it's very decentralized. We have county sheriffs, we have your town marshals or city police departments. It's very decentralized, and if the attempt to bring in control because of this chaos that we see going on, it's very, very troubling, and it gives me a lot of cause to be concerned. And some people say it started with Ferguson. I think Ferguson was a good jump off point, but I think that it was building before that. And while I will stand up and be the first one to say we do have a lot of bad cops out there that we need to address. We got over 1 million of them in the country, and most of them are just trying to do the job. So we have to work together. And I wrote an article for Dan Johnson with Solutions Institute where we talk about how it's the police responsibility to go back in these communities and earn that respect. And I think that if we can see that movement from the police side, the communities will naturally will take the steps back towards the police, so we can have some kind of sanity in our inner cities right now, because it's getting very bad.
Greg, let me jump in to say that I was just having this conversation with a couple of friends today, and it was regarding a friend of mine, someone I know that works as a police officer in a major city. We can just say that. And a long, thoughtful conversation was occurring about this similar subject, same subject matter. And he told me that, well, you know what, we were in the middle of a situation the other day, my partner and I, and we saw a guy take off and run across the street in the middle of, without giving away too many details. This guy took off, and they looked at each other and said, all right, what do you want to go get for lunch? Because there's no way that they're going to end up on somebody's cell cam video and have their entire lives ruined over some sort of situation they might find themselves in. So, I mean, directly from somebody working in a major metropolitan area on the police force, they're actively telling me off the record that they're not pursuing crime in the way that they used to anymore, because they're being looked at as monsters, and certain political leaders are taking advantage of that moment to kind of stir up a really unhealthy amount. I'd say any amount is unhealthy, but a large dose of racial animus where, let's face it, look at the statistics, look at the numbers, look at the percentages. There are some cases that have come up in the past few years that are indefensible, as you would expect them to be. And in cases like Walter Scott in Carolina, shoot somebody in the back that's running away, guess what? He's fired, and he's standing charged for murder. But unfortunately,
let me cut in,
most
Brian.
of these cases are being trumped up. Yeah, go ahead.
Let me cut in on that one. In that particular case, the reason that police officer faced trial is because someone videotaped him shooting the guy and then planting his taser on him and setting up, basically setting up a scenario that he could justify, and all his police reports were false. So that's an officer who got caught because someone had a video camera and he got caught lying. So
right.
I wrote this a couple of years ago. There is a problem of accountability for bad actors in the police ranks. And Frank Serpico wrote a piece for Politico a couple of years ago, and I used that as a platform to add to it. But the problem is across the board in every community. It's not just in black communities. And so my problem I have with Black Lives Matter is they want to turn it into a racial issue, and it's not a racial issue. It's an issue of people who should not be police officers being allowed to be police officers. Those who are power hungry, psychopathic, they're not being properly screened and prevented from being in service, and they're not being properly kicked out. So this is the problem, as Frank Serpico said. He said the day the bad cops fear the good cops is when this will stop, and that day is not here yet. And yes, I know been cases where police departments have policed their own, but a lot of times there is that circle of silence among cops. It's a reality, and they tend to cover up the bad actions of their fellows. So there's a problem that needs to be addressed and fixed, whether it's oversight committees by civilians. You know, I'm not sure what. To me, it's the obligation of the police department themselves to make sure that they purge out bad apples. They have to get rid of them. But it's not a racial problem. I don't think it is. If you got a racist cop, by all means, run him out of your force. But I think the problem is the lack of accountability and also the militarization of the police. I think Radley Balco is correct. There's a time and a place for SWAT, but SWAT started out to deal with hostages and pretty extreme situations of terrorism back in the 70s with radical leftists running around blowing up buildings and taking hostages. That's what SWAT started out for, and I think Balco's absolutely spot on. It's turned into, you know, a warrant service. You shouldn't be using SWAT to serve just everyday search warrants on people's homes. So there is a serious problem and mission creep there that has a side effect, and the war on drugs has a serious side effect. So I think all of this stuff goes together, and those of us who are more libertarian-minded have been, you know, complaining about this for years. Police are not focused as much on, you know, what we call malum in se, like murder, rape, robbery. Those are things that are clearly, you know, against natural law as well as man-made law. I think the war on drugs has been, as Sheriff Mack has said, it's a war on the Constitution. When you're trying to go and stop people from doing something they want to do to themselves, all you wind up doing is destroying the Bill of Rights. And just like Prohibition was a friggin' failure and led to corruption and led to abuse of power, the same thing has happened in the war on drugs. It's the giant elephant in the room that a lot of people just don't want to talk about. So, frankly, I think they should, when it comes to federal, there shouldn't be any federal law about it. It should be a state matter. I think Ron Paul's right about that. And we need to de-escalate and end the damn war on drugs. Treat them like you do an alcoholic. That treats them as human beings that need help rather than someone that should be locked away. And I think that would kill the illegal drug trade anyway and help to get rid of the cartels and the criminal gangs. So anyway, we have a lot of problems, but what's happened, I think, with Black Lives Matter is the radical leftists, the people who hate this country because they're communists, are attempting to turn the entire black population into their foot soldiers and make them see things only through a racial lens and make them hate white people and divide us along racial lines. And, of course, the backlash is that more white people wind up looking at black people as though they're all their enemy, and they start falling for that stuff too. And the same divide between veterans and police and between the people and the police. They want to divide and conquer us all. In the end, we're all going to be their slaves on their slave plantation. So I think we have to make sure that we don't fall for the divide and conquer.
Yeah, I would say what we're seeing as far as politically trying to stir up race relations, I think it's despicable. And I can't help but think about the leadership from the very top of the country. And it's really jumped in and injected politics. Barack Obama's presidency, his term really has tried at every single occasion, like Rahm Emanuel said, to never waste the opportunity to exploit a crisis. Hillary said it as well. I mean, but it's politics 101. Yes, it's slimy. Yes, it's horrible, but it's politics 101. It's why when there's a hurricane going on right now, it's about global climate change or cooling or warming or whatever they want to call it today. They want to find a way to take more money and get more control over every walk of life doing it, you know. So, I mean, it does get a little weird when you start thinking about the politics of just how deep you can spin things in the American 2016. And so, Greg, what I was wondering is, kind of piggybacking off of what Stewart was talking about with Black Lives Matter and how they've been really stirring up this racial animus. What's your takeaway on this? I mean, we all have unique perspectives, but I mean, coming from the force, like you have, what's your take on all this?
Well, first I want to address the gentleman that your friend of yours, the other officer. I like to address him directly. I don't know him. I don't know where he's working, but I would like to say to him do your job. If you have a crime that was committed and that guy takes off on you, do your job. Because if that guy goes around the corner thinking that you're still chasing him, carjacks somebody, you're on the hook for that because you didn't do your job, and you know that. You know that. So that would be my only thing I would like to say to him: do your job. You know.
Let me add this and get a follow-up, if you would, Greg. This is I'm a big sports fan. I do a show called The Unhappy Hour: Indians, Cavs, Browns, and Buckeyes. So I finally celebrated the first championship from LeBron James and the Cavaliers that I've ever celebrated in my time on planet Earth. So I'm pretty excited. But when any team is going for a championship, they say it's 50-50 balls. So it's the bouncing basketball headed out of bounds. Who's going to take that extra effort to dive into the stands to flip the ball back to hopefully save one extra possession? It's a 50-50. It's a coin toss. And I think that's what the person I was speaking with was saying. When their intuition said go, but it turned into a coin toss of I'm only 91% certain, I'm not completely on that. When it goes to something that's a maybe should I, maybe shouldn't I, those 50-50 balls, they're passing on. I'm not saying they're walking around going to Starbucks all day. I'm just saying on the 50-50, on the loose balls, on the fumble, they're Cam Newton in the Super Bowl. They're not really going for it 100%. They'll grab it if it's there, but they're not putting out their maximum effort. So I don't know if I was clear on that or not, or if it makes a difference. Do you think it makes a difference?
No. Here's the thing, okay? You have a duty to act, a duty to respond to that. And it's different if you're walking down the street, walking to your car, walking into a building, some guy takes off on you. You don't need to rabbit that and just start chasing him, no. But if you witness a crime, you're walking up to a building and a guy comes out a window of a house and you tell him to stop because that might be a burglary that you just interrupted and he keeps running, do your job. You might have a burglary on your hands. You might have something else on your hands. You might have a guy who just nailed his front door shut and had to come out his window. You don't know, but if you do witness some kind of crime, do your job, and that's my thing. If you witness a crime, do your job. You have a job to do. If it's just something where it could be anything. Could be just that guy coming out his window. That's his window. Okay, that's a whole nother thing. But there's no crime there. No need for you to address that. But if you witness a crime, do your job. And that's it. That's what I have to say to that.
And so then your message politically, as far as how you've seen these things exploited, what's your take on all that?
Well, you can clearly see where these things are exploding to be pushed toward division. Politically, we talk about Black Lives Matter in the inner city. I'm black. My mom's black. My grandma's black. My grandmother is the daughter of sharecroppers. My great-grandmother was the daughter of slaves. So you can't come and tell me how it's been in the inner city because I know. I've been there. I was 18. You could legally possess a firearm in Indiana when you're 18. I legally carried a gun, but I was treated like crap as an 18-year-old inner city black kid by some cops. Did that change my whole perception on all cops? No. Did it change some perception on those two cops? Absolutely. But what did I do?
There's a big difference between generalizing and locking in one particular situation on a case-by-case basis. There's a big difference.
Exactly. And when we got a lot going on in our inner city, and we could do 2 or 3 shows about what's going on in the inner city. But
well, by the way, Greg, maybe we should.
And I think we should. But when we talk about cops in the inner city, that's a hard, you're talking about a hard job. You're talking about a time when you're being called to houses, to people's problems, to businesses to address these problems that are actually much deeper than law enforcement themselves. When you're called, you're addressing the addiction. You know, when we talk about, I'm just not just talk about drugs, we talk about alcohol too, where we have the bane of addiction in our inner city, where the addiction rates of our inner city are 3 to 4 times the addiction rates in other areas. So we're in my experience, you know, police officers having some of these confrontations with black folks in the inner city, that's not specifically an issue of itself, while it is, but it's more of a symptom of something else that's going on in our inner cities. And we got a lot to do to address that. You know, I've been on both sides. I got family who's living that street life. I got family who's been murdered living that street life. I got a cousin, Jamal, who we will never know who his killer was. And it's because of something much deeper going on in the inner city than just some cops doing responding in ways they're not trained. And then to go back to some of these things where we see these cops doing these things that we don't like. When we see something that Stewart and I have talked about extensively with the Tamir Rice killing.
Right.
We talked about a cop acting outside of the way he was trained, and he should have been arrested and put on trial for that. And,
hey, real quick, what was the proper protocol? It would have been 2.4 seconds and a few trigger pulls. What was the proper protocol on that? Because I followed it, and it was way too fast. It did not seem like it was well thought out at all.
Well, the very first thing that I will say as a law enforcement instructor, as a FTO, is there's no way he was trained to respond that way. There's no way that you are trained to drive up to someone like that you think has a gun. There's no way he was trained to respond like that. And if he is,
right,
then it's on the Cleveland police, and they need to revamp their training because he did how he was trained. But there's no way he was trained to do that. You're never trained to just drive right up on a guy with a gun like that, or who you think would have a gun. There's no way. And so if he was, by some means, trained to respond in that way, that's on the Cleveland PD, and they should be accountable for that. But if he did not respond in the means that he was trained to address a person with a gun, whether you stop off at a distance and call them out, call them to you, whether you get behind, you know, whatever cover that might be available, call them to you, or any other means, he did not respond in the normal way that an officer would respond to a call, a person with a gun call, or a person potentially
right,
with a gun call. There's no way he was trained to do that. And if he did not respond like he was trained, it's on him. You did not act in good faith.
That makes a lot of sense, because you hear people talking about training methods and, should everybody have a body camera to both prevent problems from the cops and the general public. I mean, it'll protect an innocent police officer as much as it'll incriminate a bad police officer. You know, it's neither good nor bad. But Stewart, I kind of wanted to talk to you for a second and spin it over into this. We've seen things happening throughout major cities, and I kind of wanted to just take this opportunity, right after Charlotte, right around the time of the hurricane rolling through, and really think about some of these things, as the police are trying to figure out their best way to respond to situations. I mean, we saw all of the criticisms and critiques of FEMA during Hurricane Katrina. If you were in Charlotte, if you were in Ferguson, and I know you have been, around some of these places, a lot of Oath Keepers have, what are some of the things that you want to make sure that you do?
Well, in Ferguson, for example, what we did is the first response by the police there was way over the top. MRAPs pointing sniper rifles at the entire crowd. Once again, that is not how they were trained, and so a lot of things they did were wrong, that violated people's rights. You know, firing tear gas and rubber bullets into the crowd in general, and hitting reporters, for example. That's all kind of like outdated, old school riot control tactics. And the more effective way to do it, as Greg, I'm sure, will back me up, is to send out undercover officers into the crowd, identify the actual troublemakers, the guys who are throwing, you know, rocks or bottles or getting ready to throw a Molotov cocktail. That's the person committing crime. The other people, they have a right to free speech and assembly and a right to protest. I might disagree with their point. That's not the point, though. So we stood up for the rights of the people of Ferguson to protest or wherever they're from, and we made it very clear to the governor that and the police that they were doing it wrong. And it was a pretty strong letter, pretty much a letter of warning to the governor that you're about to step in it big time, and we're not going to like it if you keep doing this kind of stuff. And so they did better the second time around, but that was the main point for us, is we stood up for the rights of the protesters, but at the same time, you can't tolerate looting and arson. Arson is a threat of deadly force. And so we deployed Oathkeeper volunteers to go down there and guard an entire block of both shops and apartments. There were apartments above the shops where people lived. And we guarded and protected them from arsonists who came during the daytime and swore they were going to burn, you know, they said, we're going to burn these effers down tonight. And then, you know, our guys were on the rooftops, and we had MARSOC Marines, Special Forces veterans, retired police officers, very competent people, led by a current serving, one of the leaders there was a current serving defensive tactics instructor, John Kerriman, with the Police Academy in Missouri. And he's now our Missouri leader. But anyway, the point though was to show the people of Ferguson what they should have been doing themselves. It should have been the veterans of Ferguson stepping up to keep the peace and prevent the arson, so that the peaceful protesters were allowed to go protest. You shouldn't have to bring in the National Guard, but if you do, the National Guard should be posted on top of the roofs and out front of the buildings, and the government did not do that, and which led us to believe that there was a political agenda in play to let burnings happen, let arson happen, to maximize the fear, maximize the false choice. The false choice we're being presented with is we're going to have more civil unrest and more arson and more riots and more violence unless we nationalize the police, unless we militarize the police under the DOJ and under the FBI. But you're going to wind up with militarized police, nationalized, out of your control. That's the wrong solution. The right solution is the founder's solution, and that was the people themselves provide their own security as the militia or as the posse for the sheriff. They protect their own homes and their own town, and you can't have an abuse of power when it's the people themselves who are their own security. So we really wanted to see the people of Ferguson step up. That's a long, hard road to get a lot of people in big cities to take responsibility and fill that vacuum. But that is the right answer. The wrong answer is this false choice of either chaos in the cities or a nationalized police force, or even internationalized with the whole Strong Cities Network and the UN. That's what we're being told is the solution, and that's going from the frying pan into the fire. Whether it's Nazi Germany or Stalinist Russia, they always nationalize the police and bring them under their control, and then you're all going to be abused, and you're going to have no accountability whatsoever. Good luck.
Okay, well, the Baltimore mayor, you know, it reminds me that Stephanie Rawlings Blake, she said, she gave those who wished to destroy space to do that. You know, that goes into, like, there was either some coordinated effort or some sort of inability to competently perform your task. But, I mean, we did see quite a bit of damage. A lot of it could be classified as unnecessary, things that did not need to happen. Greg, what did you make of your response? Of, you know, if you could kind of bounce around, pick your favorite city. I mean, well, not favorite city, but what happened in Dallas? What happened in Charlotte? were you in general happy with most of the methods that were used by law enforcement? Were you disappointed? Did you feel like they were intentionally trying to allow destruction to happen, like the Baltimore mayor said? What was your take on that, having worked in all of the techniques and strategies behind all these operations?
Well, first, let's look at Ferguson and Baltimore as two bad examples. You got two extreme examples there. You have the Baltimore where they were given the space to destroy, and then you have Ferguson where it was a very heavy-handed response, where you got guys with rifles in crowds trying to deal with the crowd. That right there is a recipe for disaster for innocent people to get hurt. And then we look at Baltimore, where we have the kind of standoffish. We don't want any more problems. Standoffish. We're going to let them do. We're going to let it fizzle out. Well, those are piss poor responses to a similar problem. And then let's look at Indianapolis, for example. At the time of the Ferguson uprising, we're just right down I-70 from St. Louis. And Indianapolis, we had a protest downtown Indy. It was a real protest, no riots. Our police officers IMPD officers downtown stood around, talked to the protesters. Nothing happened. It was actually engaging. We had some of the Indianapolis Metropolitan Police Department brass go down there, talk to some folks, and they heard some concerns about IMPD. Exactly what a protest should be. The cops didn't come in and interrupt constitutionally protected activity, and then there was some engagement by the police from concerned citizens and their community. Now let's look at Charlotte. We actually had a couple of nights of not protests but riots. We had riots, and one of the things that we talk about, the manipulation, and we see these CNN, all your mainstream media calling these things protests. When you have property damage, when you have looting, when you have semi-trucks being burned, that is a riot. And through your county sheriff, in almost every state, the county sheriff has the authority to maintain the peace and suppress breaches of the peace. A riot is a breach of the peace. So what did we see in Charlotte? And by the way, you'll see an article written by me coming up on the Oath Keepers main site here this weekend about the contrast of the two responses. But you'll see by the third night, we actually had protests in Charlotte. And what did the Charlotte police, the North Carolina Highway Patrol, and North Carolina National Guard do by that third night? They stayed out of the way. We had constitutionally protected activity. They stayed out of the way. They received calls for a couple of unruly crowds. They moved to those crowds and dealt with those unruly crowds while the vast majority of the protesters were left alone. We saw video of people taking selfies with the National Guard, people taking selfies with the Highway Patrol. These are things that were going on that should be going on in a protected activity, the protests.
Yeah, I gotta tell you, one of the things I can't stand is when they get in the roads. I just absolutely cannot stand it. It's bad on so many levels, Greg.
And while for me, as a police officer, you got to find a way to deal with that, because you do have a public safety concern with these roads blocked, with people, with the vast majority of the rest of the people in the area, their right to freely travel and not be interrupted by other people. But you have these other people's right to protest. And what you don't want to see an agency do is start treading that water of the First Amendment zones that we've seen in certain places, like during the conventions, the political conventions. But you want to see.
I was up there at Bundy Ranch, and they had the First Amendment zone. Everybody was laughing and taking pictures of it. I mean, there's nothing funny about the showdown up there, but I mean, the fact that that some people thought, here's where you can have your free speech, that is terrifying.
Exactly. And so as an agency, you have to work with your community. You have to work with your law, that what is the law in your state, to deal with that. And the laws could be drastically different from state to state. There's a way, we saw one agency, and I'll have to review the video, but the people came on the interstate and blocked the interstate. So the highway patrol came out, blocked off the interstate at the nearest exit, diverted the traffic, changed the traffic around the protest to one way, so they had an express lane around the protest, back onto the interstate and back on to doing what you were doing. So you can see different ways that agencies can deal with these things and not trample on anybody's constitutional rights, not trample on anybody's right to protest, not trample on anybody's right to travel. It's just we have to work within what's accepted in our communities, what's accepted in our laws, and think outside the box to deal with these things.
Right. Well, you know, I like to always think of myself, well, I don't like to always think of myself, but one of the thoughts that often pops into my head when I'm watching these scenes is, what would happen if it were me stuck in traffic? What if it were me and my family and my loved ones stuck in traffic, and things are happening to my vehicle and people are assaulting and threatening? What do you do in that circumstance? So, Stewart, let me ask you that, kind of like the flip side of things. When the next riot comes to your city, because it's going to happen again, unfortunately, I just see a political motivation behind this. What are some of the things you want to make sure that you go out of your way to avoid allowing yourself to wind up in? What situations do you want people to avoid or pay attention to?
Well, I think people need to understand that we have seen, as you said, and we saw in San Jose also, the Trump supporters being beaten by people who, there was a stand-down order given to the entire police department to not interfere, and that left those people who were there, whether they like Trump or not, they have a right to assemble and a right to free speech, and allowing them to be beaten in the streets. I saw one old guy cold-cocked and knocked unconscious, like a knockout game. And that's potentially deadly. You could smack your head on a concrete and die when you're knocked out like that. So that's serious stuff. So if you're going to be in an area where the thugs are allowed to run rampant, you have to make sure that you're able to take care of yourself. And if you can't, don't go there. And if you're going to go there, then go in groups of 2 to 4. You know, this is just the reality we're in. We're in a situation where this stuff has been politicized. Like Greg said, if it's a riot, that's not a protest. Arson is not a protest. Beating people is not constitutionally protected free speech. That's a crime. But we have politicians who want to maximize and we've seen this in other countries. I was just reading, a prepper book about Argentina, and that same thing happened down there, is that the thugs were excused by the government and allowed to beat people. It's not just in this country. So, but the problem is that as this goes on and people realize they have to defend themselves, and as the police are, some police departments obey orders that are wrong, they don't do their duty, like Greg said, their duty is to prevent crime. And when they're obeying orders to stand down and leave people exposed to crime, you're eventually going to get a shooting by someone defending themselves against thugs, and of course that will be twisted around as though white people are murdering black people for protesting. It'll always be twisted to turn into a racial issue rather than what it is, which is just simply thugs being allowed to run rampant. So I think the right answer is look, if you are in a community, whether you're black, Hispanic, white, whatever your race is, and you think there's a serious problem with the police and you want to protest, then you had better make sure that you stop the arson, you stop the rapes, the robberies, the murders. I mean, Ferguson, there were people killed during that. A lot of times gangbangers will take advantage of the situation and go settle scores. You have got to keep the peace and prevent the looting and the arson in particular, so that the message you're trying to send is not polluted, is not cast aside. The focus is now on the rioting. But a lot of these activists, so-called activists that come in from outside and they go into a city, they bring the message that, well, looting itself and rioting and violence is somehow free speech and is somehow appropriate. I'm looking at the Wikipedia entry on Ferguson, and you got Time magazine defending the looting and the arson that's going on there, and also going back to Rodney King, saying, here's a quote, "Blacks in this country are more apt to riot because they are one of the populations here who still need to. In the case of the 1992 riots, 30 years of black people trying to talk about their struggle of racial profiling and muted but still vastly unfair treatment came to a boil. Sometimes enough is simply too much. After that catalyst event, the landscape of Southern California changed, and nationally, police forces took note." So they're defending this as somehow legitimate political free speech that gets results. That is actually a recipe for friggin' disaster for anybody who actually cares about reform of police departments. All you're going to wind up doing is losing legitimacy and alienating vast sections of this country against you. It's stupid. It's kind of like comparing Malcolm X to Martin Luther King. Malcolm X wanted to use force. Martin Luther King had the wisdom to say, that's the wrong way to go. You use peaceful protest and civil disobedience. You don't commit violence and crimes. So that's what I have to say about that. I think they're cutting their own throats. If you follow Black Lives Matter and you follow people that are trying to instigate rioting and looting, all you're doing is hurting your cause.
Yeah, I've been saying that for a real long time. I mean, we were out there covering Occupy LA. We were at the RNC, at the DNC. We've been up at Bundy Ranch. You know, we've had people at all these major cities where situations are popping off, and you know, everybody has the right to say what they want to say. They have we all have our opinion. We all have our perspective. We all have our points of view and the points that we want to make. But none of us have the right to infringe upon somebody else's rights in doing it. You know, it's like, oh, well, look, you got to stop traffic to get any attention. It's like, no, man, there could be an ambulance back there with somebody who needs these 3 minutes before they suffer brain death. They are more important than you taking away their freedoms. That's not a message. That's really out of line. And you just instantly lose respect for people that want to negotiate on those terms. So, I mean, it is something that, you know, you talk about the LA riots. I think of Reginald Denny. You know, I think about the trucker that was pulled out of his rig, and it had concrete cinder block or whatever thrown onto his head as people are dancing around him for no apparent reason. No apparent reason, just let's go get this guy. I really think that our country is capable of doing much better than this, and I think it's part of the reason why I like to have these conversations is because I feel as though if we don't have better conversations, we're really going to risk worse outcomes and resolutions. I just really think the powder keg is all set, and I'm trying as much as I can with my words, the pen being mightier than the sword, trying to de-escalate some of this. You know, I've had my own run-ins with LAPD. With a 6'6" black officer, almost threw me down a flight of stairs to where I had about a 5'2" Asian officer breathing down my neck, trying to really escalate nothing into a fight. And I felt that it was ridiculous, but there was an escalation where there really didn't need to be at all. And I think there are some legitimate concerns in a lot of these protests, but I think we have to be really careful when we're talking about it and when we're protesting and we're getting our opinions out there, that we're doing it in the right way. So I think you're spot on with that. We're running out of time here, and I want to thank both Greg McWhirter and Stewart Rhodes, both of Oath Keepers, for their time and having a little chat about all of this. And, you know, we will do another show You've both been on our program before. We'll do it again. We'll figure out whatever the heck the glitch was today. We'll get that up and going. I wonder if it's something with the browser. But I digress. We'll get that figured out. But until the next time we talk, we may have a new president at that point. So I kind of want to just maybe do a ping pong, a back and forth real quick with you guys, and just kind of get your thoughts on this election. And for people who love liberty, what do you tell somebody that's really conflicted at this point in the election? So I'll send it to you guys.
I would say we, much like back in 2008 and 2012, once again, I think we're FUBAR either way. I think Hillary is certainly, first of all, a blatant felon. She should be behind bars or on trial rather than running for office. And I think she's, quite frankly, I think she's a extremely dangerous future Stalinist or Maoist. I think she's incredibly dangerous. But on the flip side to that, while I agree with Trump on a lot of stuff, I was, both Greg and I were shocked. We're not going to be shocked, but it was bad to see him stand up and say he agrees with Hillary Clinton when it comes to using government watch lists to sweep away your right to bear arms. And I'm on a friggin' government watch list. Whenever I fly, I get the 4S designation every time. I can't even fly without the ticket agent calling DHS and getting permission. So these watch lists are massive. They contain over 1 million people in the United States, and it's incredibly arbitrary. Multiple agencies can put you on there with a stroke of a few keystrokes. Some nameless bureaucrat could stick you on there. You have no idea you're even on it until you go to buy a gun, you can't buy a gun, or go to fly and you have a problem. So it's arbitrary. It's a black hole as to how you get on it, and it's a black hole about getting off of it. Good luck. You can file some complaint, and they won't even tell you whether or not your complaint has been rectified. It's a black hole. So it's an incredible violation of a core right to say you're going to take the Second Amendment and make it susceptible to being wiped away by a bureaucrat like that. And then also his advocacy of stop and frisk. Just blatant violation of the Fourth Amendment. So it's pretty clear to me that Donald Trump either does not understand the Constitution, which is very likely, or he just doesn't care. And so I don't see him as any kind of a silver bullet. I think Hillary would be a disaster, but I don't see Donald Trump as the knight on the white horse by any means.
Well, and then there's also Edward Snowden, who the New American Media has named their TNAM Person of the Year for, once again, like you said, the Fourth Amendment. Fourth Amendment is very, very important. I think it's already too late. I think the big conglomerates, the mega companies, the data miners, if you will, Facebook to Google, and pick your favorite alphabet agency. I think everything is out there, and I think the cat's kind of out of the bag. I think Pandora's out of her box with the Fourth Amendment, but that doesn't mean that we shouldn't strive for something different and find a way to still protect that very core tenet of what our Bill of Rights is all about. The Snowden thing, I mean, it's pretty unforgivable, so I can't sit and defend Trump myself. I know I'm 100% against Hillary Clinton. I just don't know what I'm left with there, So I think there's a lot of people in the same boat where I'm at, just kind of trying to figure out what to do. So, I mean, Greg, what's your take on the election as we wrap this up?
My words to people would be: do not be complicit. Refuse to be complicit. If you were complicit in a crime, you would be held accountable. Do not be complicit in either one of these two crimes. Whether we have this war hawk in Hillary, who has the exact same approach that we saw during the Bush administration, there will be no difference. Does. And then we have Donald Trump, who, like Stewart said, either does not understand the Constitution or does not care. Don't be complicit in these crimes. And I would ask people to get with people and say, I refuse to be complicit. And if all these people who would say Gary Johnson doesn't stand a chance would actually vote for Johnson, he'd probably win. But we can't have the endorsement of these ideas that, and to me, stop and frisk is very, very personal to me as a advocate of people's right to keep and bear arms, and for being in the inner city. The idea that just because you live in a certain area, you have less rights than someone else is ridiculous. And so we should move forward as communities, as counties, as states, as nations, and say we refuse to be complicit in the violation of other people's rights. And I would like people to think about that, because while you might have a stop and frisk being orchestrated on someone in some far-off community, the day when it comes to yours, it's going to be too late.
Mm-hmm. That's right.
Well, I think these are crucial conversations that we need to have. You know, it's a political season. It's the silly season. I kept waiting for WikiLeaks to really dump the treasure trove on Clinton, and who knows, they still might. It didn't happen yet, but you know, it's really important to kind of sift through this. Do you go lesser of two evils? Do you refuse to be complicit in the act? Do you cast a protest vote? Do you really, you know, believe in something that another third or fourth party option is providing? I don't know the right answer here. I mean, there's a lot of valid points that are going around, and it's really hard to pick apart anything that you guys just said
Hey, Brian,
about some of the frustrations of the election.
Can I say one more thing?
Yeah, for sure.
I think people need to realize that because of the incredibly the Walking Dead zombie economy we have, and all of the problems we have in this country, the massive growth of the NSA, the shadow government, all this stuff is coming to a head. And we're going to be in deep doo-doo no matter what happens, no matter who wins. But your solutions also should be the same no matter what happens, no matter who wins. You're going to need local security. When we have an economic collapse, you're going to need local security, local resilient mutual aid, food. So store some food, start a neighborhood watch, meet your neighbors, and start unifying in your community, and hook up with your local police. Make sure that you know who you are and that you're on their side, as long as you're on the side of the Constitution, and start at the very bottom and get strong. That we can do between now and January 20th. We can make ourselves much stronger. So no matter what happens, we're better off and better able to resist that false choice of tyranny.
Yeah, that's a good point. I've had people asking me about, you know, what do you do to prepare? And I said, well, just go on our YouTube channel and you'll find out, you know, I think we have a whole channel dedicated to different bug-out options and bug-out bags and different end of the, you know, without rule of law scenarios. And you really got to think these things through so that, you know, I to use another sports analogy, I think the reason why my high school football team went undefeated junior year and my senior year, and to the state championship my junior year, second round of the playoffs my senior year, I think it was because our coaching staff did such a good job, an excellent job, of studying the other teams we were playing on the game film and coaching us up in practice during the week of when we were facing them. We were so ready for our opponent every single week that when we were out there, we never had paralysis through analysis. We always were able to act reflexively, and in that reflex, we were able to just play the game. It came right to us because we had practiced it enough. We weren't thinking about it. Our muscle movement was already dropping the left shoulder, getting ready for the guard that is pulling across the offensive line. We knew what was up. So, you know, I think it's of crucial importance that people spend some time thinking up strategies, whether it's, hey, if a hurricane comes to Florida today, if a hurricane comes in 3 days, what do I need to grab? What do I need to get in order? What is the game plan? Where am I going? Where am I staying? Do I have clothing? Do I have my medicine? What about the pets? What about this? What about that? People need to have these plans in place before they need them. So I think that's just of crucial importance, and I'm really glad you brought that up because I guess maybe it's a former Boy Scout in me. I don't think I'm apocalyptic in any regard other than common sense thinking about situations. But, I think to prepare for the worst and hope for the best is usually the best strategy. I will vividly remember the conversation with somebody I had in an elevator at a talent agency in Beverly Hills. He said, it's better to need it and not have it. Well, I screwed it up. It's better to have it and not need it than to need it and not have it. Talking about some report that he brought with him to a meeting. And it's the same thing. If you got to go, if you need a game plan, if something has happened, you better have it in place. And hopefully you'll never need it. Hopefully you'll never put it into action. But if you do, man, it's a penny of prevention is worth a pound of cure. So I think that's enough of my bumper sticker phrases and T-shirt phrases for the day.
What's due to most of all is community. Training trumps gear, but community trumps both, because you can't do it by yourself. I don't care how high speed you were back in the day or how high speed you are now, or how much stuff you have. If you don't have community around you, and in particular mutual defense, you're cooked. The secret squirrel prepper that hides on a stash of crap in his basement is going to wind up being a cache for the gangs, or the doomsday marauder jackasses out there whose plan is to go and raid people. You've got to have security in your community. And that's why the founders, they said a militia is necessary for the security of a free state, because you won't be free and you won't be secure without it. So that you want to do a show that's important, do a show about that, about community security and why the founders had it right and how we get back to that, because nothing else is as important as that. Nothing else.
And if I could jump in there just for a second, I got out of the inner city. And I'll tell you right now, growing up in Indianapolis, every single person who I went to school with, every young man that I went to school with, what was his dream? Grow up, get out the hood. That's what his goal was. I took it one step further. I went ahead and got out of the entire urban center because I know that that's going to be the killing fields, the slaughter. That's where it's going to start. It's going to start in the cities. You're going to have those who are unprepared attempting to feed off of the prepared. And those marauders, those thieves, those people who would come and take because they were not able or did not have the foresight to prepare themselves, whether it's going to be those folks right now in Florida, whether it's going to be those folks who were in Katrina, whether it's going to be the folks who were effectively prisoners in their own homes during the riots in Ferguson, where it might last days, it might last weeks, it might be something more permanent. You need to take care of yourself, you need to take care of your family, and then you need to build from there and build that community Stewart was talking about. Talk with your neighbors, engage them, have just some kind of meeting where you go out, talk to each other. You might find out that you got a former trauma surgeon next to you who has no training in firearms, but could train you how to patch up your family if they're hurt. And you can exchange training. You never know. So you need to go out there and build that community and build those relationships, because it all starts from there. You can't do it by yourself.
And so do you think anybody in any city, in any urban area, has any chance to build community in an urban center?
Yeah, absolutely.
Because on one hand it's referred to as the killing fields, because, I mean, let's face it, it could become a nightmare. But I'm just wondering if there's any hope of neighborhoods in cities of getting their act together in advance.
Getting your act together? Absolutely. And you can start with simple neighborhood watches, simple church groups, simple community centers. If you don't have that, start at the library. If you don't have that, start at a school. Start with something to bring people together, to take care of each other, to exchange the abilities, to exchange what you might have in stores, to exchange ideas, so that way you guys have a better chance to survive rather than just being on your own.
Exactly. Stewart, final thoughts on that? Do you think the cities have any chance?
Well, of course. I grew up in Las Vegas, and if you're going to be in a city, then you better make the best of it. And that's why we tried to get people of Ferguson, and some did. You saw, it was kind of a neat thing you saw the media didn't pay enough attention to, as you saw, young black men standing outside of liquor stores and gas stations with rifles and shotguns, protecting the business owners. We needed more of that. There wasn't enough of it. So there's got to be a whole boatload of military veterans in Ferguson. They need to step up. So that community, every community needs to step up. The veterans have a particular duty and responsibility because they have the training and they took that oath. They have the duty to step up and organize and be the watchdogs. Like with the Deacons of Defense back in the 60s guarding against the Klan. They protected Martin Luther King by standing outside his house with rifles and shotguns, and the Klan were afraid of them. They were World War II vets who said, I'm going to use my training to stop this crap. You're not going to be able to shoot Dr. King. I'm going to put a bullet hole in you if you try. That's what it takes. It takes the good guys to be organized. There's always more good guys than bad guys. When the good guys are not organized, the bad guys have an artificial superiority of force when they come into your house and you're by yourself. So, yes, you can turn the tide against the bad guys, against the gangbangers and the thugs and the prepper pirates, as I call them, but it takes a community to do that. So that's the one thing I agree with Hillary on. It takes a village. But it takes a village to kick the gang's ass. It takes a village to kick the Klan's ass, or to kick the new Black Panthers'
The Taliban,
ass.
or the Taliban, or ISIS.
Or ISIS. It takes a village. It takes your community. You got to unify with your neighbors and man up. Step up and do what you're supposed to be doing instead of hiding in your friggin' basement. I can't stand secret squirrel preppers. They are not saving this country. That is a recipe for defeat. It's a recipe for cowardice. You're not going to fix anything by hiding away and hoping the bad guys pass you by, because they won't pass you by, and you won't fix your country.
That's a survival mindset, not a winning mindset. And that's something that you talk about in firearms training. That's a survival mindset, not a winning mindset. You got to have a winning mindset, and the only way you're going to be able to do that is to come together with the brothers and sisters in your community and get something done about it.
Yeah. Run the gangs out of town. Purge them out. You tired of that crap happening in your community? Go out there and whoop their ass. It can be done.
Well, gentlemen, this has been a really good chat. Thanks for working with me and becoming adapted, being able to adapt to the circumstances, adverse situations. I know we've almost wrapped the show up a couple times, but since we all had to troubleshoot here, final words from each of you about adapting to situations like the insider baseball for the listener right now. You can know that many different technological things went a little haywire, but you make the most of what you have. You do the best that you can with what you have. And, is that a survival mindset versus a winning mindset? Is it really just a shift in how you think? Because, a good plan today is better than a perfect plan tomorrow. That's kind of how I've run most of the philosophies in my life when it comes to working on any sort of project that might face difficulty. But back to both of you guys, a quick final thought, and also toss in there the best way to stay connected with you, or where, what website or Twitter account or Facebook feed you want people to sign up for, if you would.
Well, the first thing I would have to say is just to maintain that active mind. Don't give up on an active mind. Don't give up on, can I do something better? Learn from those mistakes that you made in the past, move it forward, and then so that way when that time comes, you can do something. You will have something in pocket ready to go. It's just like training. Stewart talks about training trumps gear. He's absolutely right. Having that already in your mindset, you'll be able to build that winning mindset and not just have a survival mindset. You can get a hold of me at on the Oath Keepers main page at oathkeepers.org. You're going to see more articles posted from me there, and you can email Oath Keepers at that website or the Oath Keepers Facebook page, and you'll be able to get a hold of me, talk to me, and connect with me at any time.
Yeah, in fact, Greg is here in Montana where I'm at, and he's our peace officer liaison for Montana. So I'll be setting him up to, along with me, to answer the email at mt@oathkeepers.org. It's the Montana email. What I would just say to people is that I would take a good look at our CPT program, which stands for Community Preparedness Teams, and it's modeled on the Special Forces structure for their A teams. And the real point of it is to stress the need for critical skills such as medical, communications, intelligence, engineering, and security. And that's all, in a Special Forces A team, there are 2 medics. So if one goes down, you have a backup. 2 is 1 and 1 is none. But what it really is showing you these are the things you need to have. These are the skills you need to have. So in yourself, if you don't have some medical skills, go at least learn how to use a tourniquet, pressor bandage, just immediate trauma aid. At least know how to run a radio, the basics of how to run a little Bofang or handheld. Have some way to communicate with your neighborhood. Get that first level of skill set across the board in all those skill areas, and keep working on yourself and cross-train. And that's what you need in your family too. Inside your family, if you don't have someone that knows a little bit about one of those topics, you need to plug those holes. Like in my own family, I realized we were kind of deficient in trauma medicine, so I sent my son to EMT school. So, plug those holes in, and you become more flexible and resilient because you have that training. And then you want to make sure you cross-train with each other, and you do that same model with your neighborhood, with your church group, like Greg said, other civic associations. They can all use that basic structure of skill sets and combining a team. And most people have something to contribute, but they don't realize that they can be a team. And Greg's strengths are different than my strengths, and weaknesses are different. But combined, we can combine our strengths and mitigate our weaknesses. And the more of that you have, the better. Like you said earlier, you might have a trauma surgeon retired, a retired nurse, a retired firefighter, a retired cop in your neighborhood. You don't know it because you're not talking to your neighbors. So go talk to your neighbors. You'll be surprised. You probably have already a pretty good team sitting right there. You just got to get yourselves to see yourselves as a team.
Very good points. Well, Greg McWhirter, Stewart Rhodes, I appreciate your time. We will be doing this again, probably under different software, hardware setups than we have right now. But it's crucial that everybody has something in mind when the worst of the worst happens, whether it's an earthquake, whether it's a riot, whether it's a hurricane. I mean, civil collapse. You can go down the list of any ridiculous thing that you want, but wherever you are, there could be tornadoes, there could be power outages when the snow hits and it downs a power wire. This isn't complicated. This isn't far-fetched. This isn't conspiracy theory. This isn't Looney Tune, tinfoil hat wearing the shenanigans and rantings and ravings of a madman. This is real life. This is pretty much the most important thing that people can pay attention to, and that really is the continuation of yourself, the self-preservation of you and your loved ones in your local communities. And regardless of who your leader happens to be, what is the phrase? When seconds count, police are only minutes away. Police don't stop crimes, they clean up crime scenes. Some of that's a little unfair, some of it's a little tongue-in-cheek, but then again, it takes a couple seconds to make a phone call if you hear a crime happening, and it's already over by the time it's reported. So, you just really have to think of these things, not in a paranoid way, but in a proactive way. So go take a look at what Oath Keepers are up to. Stay connected with these gentlemen. Go ahead and really just think about you and your loved ones, what you're going to do when you have to make a decision, and you're running out of time, and you got to fill up one backpack and go. Are you ready? Most people may not be, so it's kind of time you take a look in the mirror and say, what can I be doing better? And what do I know about my local community and my neighbors? All very good points. So once again, thank you for being on the program. My name is Brian Engelman. I want you to check out the homepage, thenewamericanmedia.com. On the right-hand side is TNAM Radio. That's where you click play to listen to the show live every time except this program. Special episode right there. But anyway, it has our Twitter page on there. We're at American_media_. It has our Facebook feed on there. And then also subscribe to youtube.com/thenewamericanmedia and join all of the conversations that we've been having there. We love reading your comments after the fact. A lot of these videos, 5 years of shows, they're all archived. A lot of good conversations, just like the one you heard tonight. And link up with us on Instagram by searching The New American Media. So for everybody out there in the TNAM Radio Network, special thanks to Greg, special thanks to Stewart, and we'll talk with you again soon. Take care. Peace.
Thank you. Appreciate it.
Thank you.
Hi, everybody. You're listening to Agree to Disagree with Brian Engelman, and this is John B. Wells reminding you that not only is Brian Engelman a cool guy, and not only is the newamericanmedia.com a very cool platform, but here's a cool idea for you, too. Are you alone? Not really. Do you like dogs? Do you like cats? You do. Of course you do. Everybody does. One or the other, maybe even both. You know, there are a lot of dogs and cats that are at shelters right now, and if somebody doesn't take them home, they're going to wind up euthanized. That's a nice way of saying they're going to be killed because there's simply not enough room. I guarantee it, the best dogs and the best cats, the best pets come from shelters. There's something about dogs and cats. They know. They know where they are. You walk through one of them, and certainly at least one is going to look at you and go, I wish you'd take me home. I'm in hell. Please take me out of here. It'll be the best thing that you ever did for your soul. You'll feel good about it. And not only that, but you have a friend for life. Doesn't matter if you got money, you don't have money. Well, it doesn't make any difference to a dog or cat. All they need is the sound of your voice and maybe even the stroke of your hand, and they're fine. Maybe a little food every once in a while. The sweetest sound that those pets ever hear is your voice. Think it over and adopt a cat or a dog from a local shelter today. I'm telling you, you'll be glad you did.